Full disclosure, I woke up with a sinus headache this morning. It is a dry shampoo hair day today, but I need to run a few places. So I thought it's definitely a powder foundation routine day. So I thought, what better day to show you guys how I apply my powder foundation to my oily combination skin than today. I live in a very hot, humid climate. I know that can be a challenge for a lot of you if you have skin like mine, to keep it on your face. There's also the challenge if you are starting to age. I am over 40 and sometimes that can be a little tricky when you're working with powders. And there is a misperception that powder foundations can make you look very cakey as well. So if you are wanting to know how to apply your powder foundation without it looking cakey, if you have oily combination maturing skin, just keep watching. I just loaded a video on my favorite powder foundations. It did include mineral foundations, loose powder foundations, as well as pressed. This video is only on my pressed powder foundation routine, and I'm gonna go through beginning to end on the skin steps from prepping the skin all the way to bronzer and stuff like that. So I'm gonna go through the whole gamut of things. I do already have my eye makeup on because I was waiting for the guy that keeps doing his yard work every time I film to finish, and so I was just killing time. Your eye makeup can be done before or after your powder foundation. That really has no bearing on anything whatsoever. The first thing I'm gonna say is that no matter what skin type you have, just moisturize before you start, because you definitely want your skin to be well prepped before going in with a powder foundation. The next thing you want to do is go in with a primer. I think a lot of people skip this step when they're applying powder foundation because they think quick foundation, I don't need a primer. But especially when you're using a powder foundation, use a primer. It will definitely help it adhere to your skin, whether you have dry skin, oily skin, whatever. I like Hourglass Mineral Veil, as most of you know if you've been following my channel for any length of time. If you have another primer that works for you, by all means use that. And I just take the normal amount that I always take, which is a pea-size amount, and apply it all over my face the same way I would if I was using a liquid foundation. Now, normally to give this time to sink in, I would go in with my eyeshadow primer, but I went on ahead and did my eyes in a very natural way already, as I already said. So I'm just talking to you guys to let it sink in just for a minute. I don't need a whole lot of time. I had to pause for a minute because the mail came and we had a mild freak out back there, which is still kind of going on. So, where was I? After you prime your face, it's time for concealer if you need it. This is an optional step. Some of you may not need concealer. Consider yourself lucky. I do. I have a few little spots going on that I'm gonna conceal up front. If all goes well, I may not need to touch those areas up when I'm done. So I cross my fingers that the application goes smoothly and that my concealer stays in place. So when we're talking about face concealing, I do like to apply creams before powders. It's just a general rule. It tends to work better. I like to use a more bulletproof concealer here because it just tends to stay on the face better when you go in with a powder on top of it. The concealers that I usually reach for are the Makeup Forever Full Cover or Tarte Shape Tape. They stick to the face really, really well. Today, I'm just gonna use the Tarte Shape Tape on the face where I need it, and I'm just gonna put a little bit on the back of my hand, not much at all, just that. And I'm gonna go in with a brush and just dab it where I need it. And again, this step is optional. And I like to dab it in with my fingers because I feel like it gets where I want it. I don't use a sponge, I use a little tiny brush. This is an e.l.f. concealing brush. But it's really precise, and that's pretty much it. And if you have any redness, you can cover the redness too while you're at it. I don't seem to have a tremendous amount of redness right now, so this is fine. So I'm just covering any minor little spots that I want to conceal, and it doesn't need to be perfect because the powder foundation is going to cover a decent amount on its own. I'm just getting rid of any little red or brown marks that I feel like might need extra coverage. I'm good with that amount of concealing on the face. Now I'm gonna go in with my under eye corrector and concealer. Again, you may be able to skip this step. I've seen some tutorials and powder foundation routines that use powder under the eyes either before or after they've done their powder on their face. And I think that that works really well if you're young and if you don't have texture under your eyes. But if you do have texture or fine lines underneath your eyes, that's just not gonna work. I cannot use the powder foundations and things like that underneath my eyes. I can use my corrector and concealer and then top it with powder the way I normally do, but I cannot just go in solely with a powder foundation and have that be my only concealing under my eyes, especially because I have dark circles. So I still use a corrector. I use either my Benefit Erase Paste or today I'm using my Tarte CC Under Eye Corrector. I have the shade Light Medium and that's what I'm gonna go in with for correcting. For concealing, I don't like to go in with a really heavy, full coverage concealer. I still want something that's gonna lift and brighten underneath the eye, but I like it to be a little bit thinner of a consistency than say Tarte Shape Tape. So something like the Milani Retouch and Erase, Bare Minerals Bare Skin, or the Estee Lauder Double Wear Concealer, any one of these would be really great with powder foundations. And I do this step before I go in with my powder foundation. I do have various videos on concealing your under eyes, setting your face, and everything like that in a playlist. I think it's called Favorites and How-Tos or How-Tos and Faves for foundation, concealers, and powders. I show you what my favorite correctors are, how to correct, how to conceal your under eyes. I've tested correctors and concealers, and you can check those out. I'll link that playlist at the end so you can see that if you haven't seen it yet. But you might find it helpful if you have not seen that yet. And you can actually see my full out method a little bit closer for concealing and correcting. You just saw me set under my eyes with the number 7 translucent setting powder, which I love. I've been talking about on my channel for quite some time now. I think it's great. If you're someone who can't set underneath your eyes with setting powder because it makes you look really dry and wrinkly, don't do that by all means. Just leave your concealer alone. I have to because I crease really badly if I don't set my under eyes. I'm still experimenting for other methods. I just haven't found one that works for me yet. Yes, I have tried setting spray. I'm still working that out. So I am going to start with the powder foundation now. I knew having my hair down like that was gonna drive some of you crazy because it was gonna get in the way. So I went ahead and put it up for you, and I'm gonna get into the actual powder foundation now, but all of that is part of this foundation routine, so I wanted to include that for you. I am just going to swish my brush into the powder foundation. It's dusty, that's the way it is. A lot of people get a big fluffy brush and just dust the powder foundation all over their face, and then they wonder why it wears away during the day or why they look really oily and why it looks cakey. If you take a more dense brush like this and you press it into the skin, not only will you get more coverage, but your concealer that you applied will stay in place better. It will be pressed further into the skin, and it will also control shine better, and it will stay in place much, much longer during the day. And yes, it might take maybe a minute longer, but it's really worth it if you want it to last longer. And it does look better when applied this way. You can go in with quick pressing motions, or you can kind of press and roll. That's really a personal preference. I vary between the two. So you can see I'm taking it up under the under eye, but not all the way up. I want it to blend in with that area, but I don't want to change the color directly underneath my eye, and also don't want it to look too powdery under there. So I just want to mesh the two areas together. So I'm gonna do half of my face and just show you what it looks like, and then I'll go do the other half of my face and come back and talk to you. Okay, I lied. I'm going to talk to you a little sooner. After you've done those initial really good pressing motions, you can take it a little lighter and then use little short brushing motions if you want. You don't have to do this, but you can if you want a little more coverage, but you don't have to. So you can see here the coverage, and then there's still some redness over here. So I'm gonna go do this other side of my face, and then I'll talk to you about what I do next. It doesn't look too powdery or cakey at all. It just looks really nice and kind of like you applied liquid foundation and topped it with powder to set it. So it's nice, and it was only one step instead of two. It does look kind of one-dimensional because we don't have bronzer or blush or anything like that on, but it looks really good if you apply it this way. So now to give some dimension to the face, this is when I go with bronzer, and I'm using my Physicians Formula Butter Bronzer. This is the light one. I have never seen the deep one in any of my stores, so I've been using the light one forever. It works just fine for me. This is where you can apply highlighter. If you want to apply highlighter, we're going to do blush next. I'm using the Laura Mercier Matte Radiance Baked Highlighter in shade 01, which is a really pretty, very subtle highlighter. I like a subtle highlight. That's just me. That's also personal preference. But I will say, when I'm trying to get out the door quickly, very rarely do I put on highlighter. I'm going for my favorite natural blush, and that is Cargo Tonga. I love it. It's one of my favorites. I talk about it all the time. I feel like a broken record. I went off camera and just cleaned up the brows a little bit and ran a little bit of my bronzer underneath my lash line and added the lips, and this is the Revlon Balm Stain in Honey, which I absolutely love, and look, the print is all worn off of it. I just wanted a natural lip today. So this is it. I hope I'm not looking washed out with this natural cheek color in person. It's absolutely just natural and flush looking. Sometimes with the windows and the light in front of me, it can look a little washed out. It's a very natural look. I'm going to address 3 questions that I have been asked about powder foundation, and I hope this helps clarify some things. Number 1 is, if you don't cover everything with your concealer before and you still see spots, what do you do? Or if maybe when you were applying it, it kind of wipes some of that concealer away. You can take that same brush that you used before and clean it off, or you can get a new brush. I mean, it's an e.l.f. brush, it's like $1, and just dip it back into your powder foundation lightly, just like so. And you can dab it onto that spot, just directly onto that spot, nowhere else, and then press it in with your finger lightly and cover it up. I would show you, but I really think that it covered me pretty well today. I don't think you're gonna be able to see it on camera. I don't think it's gonna translate. Or I've taken a teeny tiny bit of the concealers that I talked about earlier for the face and just touched it up and dabbed it in with the warmth of my finger, and it has worked over the powder. And then I'll just take my finger in the powder foundation and tap it over that, and it's worked well. So that's one thing to try. Experiment with it maybe before you're going somewhere important and see what method works for you. Question number 2, can you use a finishing powder over your powder foundation? Yes, you can. Dust it over with your brush that you usually use, because this is really just kind of like liquid foundation with setting powder over it. It settles into the skin so nicely because you pressed it in and doesn't look cakey, that you should have no problem using finishing powder over it whatsoever. I have done that countless times. It doesn't look powdery or cakey whatsoever. You're in the clear to do that. The third one is, do you use anything else to help it last? I still wear powder foundation. It melts off. If you are not pressing it into the skin, definitely do it in that method. The other thing is, setting spray is your friend. If you have a setting spray that you like, by all means, spritz that on your face if you're having an extra hot and humid day, or if you're really oily, use a setting spray. I like CoverFx Mattifying Setting Spray and Urban Decay All Nighter. I use those sometimes if I'm gonna be outside a really long time. So that's something to note if you feel like it's still not lasting on your face. Definitely use setting spray and see if that works for you. So that is my powder foundation routine that I use. It goes quicker than it did in this video because I talked through a lot of it. I hope my powder foundation routine was helpful for you if you're looking for how to apply powder foundation to not look cakey, if you have combination oily skin or, well, really any type of skin, and you just want a method to try to help it last throughout the day and not melt off your skin. Thank you so much for watching. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you here on a regular basis. And if you're not following me on social media, I'll put those on the screen and down below. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.